In the spring budget speech, you said it was responsible to have very specific, fiscal guideposts, including limiting the deficit to 40.1 billion or lower. So are you saying you're now comfortable going past that?
So I am not going to comment on anonymous rumors that are out there in the town right now.
Canada's phantom finance minister has been pulling the strings for a while. Carbon tax Carney has been forcing radical new spending and forcing the finance minister to smash through a $40 billion guardrail. And now that Canadians are fed up and angry, the Prime Minister is going to blame her, dump her, and replace her with Carney.
It's fair to say Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is having a tough week. 4 days before she's expected to present her fall economic statement, there are questions about whether or not this will be her last one. The Globe and Mail is reporting tensions are so high between Freeland and the Prime Minister over spending plans that there are renewed talks to bring Mark Carney into government. Are Freeland's days as Finance Minister numbered? Let's ask our front bench. Former BC Premier Christy Clark, she's now Senior Advisor at Bennett Jones. Former Alberta Cabinet Minister Gary Mar, he's the CEO of the Canada West Foundation, and former Manitoba Premier and Canadian Ambassador to the United States, Gary Doer. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Christy, this isn't the first time that Mark Carney has been rumored to be in talks for a cabinet seat that's already taken. So what does all of this say to you this week?
Well, I mean, prime ministers and leaders often shuffle their cabinet when you get closer to an election. There is no doubt about that. That happens in almost every government. I don't think it should be any shock if it happens here. That's a fresh face on a government that's been around a while. There's premiers, and I certainly felt this way sometimes. You almost never get, you almost always find that can go some of the way to repairing any issues you've got in the polls. Now, it's not a panacea, but it's a pretty common thing to do. So I don't know what the Prime Minister is contemplating here, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of a shuffle not that far in the future, because he's going to want a fresh face. That's a pretty common thing to do.
But Gary, is this just a fresh face, or is it trying to set a major reset button when you consider that this is someone who's not in government, technically with the party as an economic advisor, but still not?
It is, in my view, a fairly extraordinary move to try and bring somebody who's outside of government into government, particularly in the role of finance minister, and particularly somebody like Mark Carney. If you think about successful prime ministers and premiers in the past, you would think about, people like Ralph Goodale, or you'd think about Paul Martin, or you'd think about somebody like, Joe Oliver. I mean, premiers and prime ministers really stick with their finance ministers because they have to be really consensus ad idem. They have to be of the same mind with each other as it relates to the directions that the fiscal spending of a province or a federal government is going to go. So I think Christy's right that it's not uncommon to shuffle cabinet posts before an election, and we've seen lots of that. It hasn't yielded any particularly positive results in terms of polling for the Liberal Party. But to shuffle out a cabinet minister, one only has to look at what happened to Bill Morneau when he crossed, in his views with the Prime Minister on spending, and he found himself on the outs. And it appears that the same pattern is going to happen with Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah, and Gary Doer, I mean, it is a healthy relationship to have a finance minister and a prime minister who are sometimes butting heads, because essentially, Chrystia Freeland is holding all the purse strings here, and you can't really, you have to have that type of check and balance. And I say that because you had Paul Martin with Jean Chrétien, that they were not always on the same page about everything. So that is a healthy relationship to have, but it doesn't seem like there have been that types of healthy relationships that this Prime Minister has had when you consider what Bill Morneau had said in his book and some of the criticism he had of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Well, of course, Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin did butt heads, but they did it in a way that came out with a consensus on how they were going to reduce the deficit, and they came out with a budget that ultimately did that. So I would expect the Premier or the Prime Minister to have very, very tough decisions to make, and make them in consensus with each other and come out united. These leaks every day over the last week are just really, really not very elegant, and very, very, I think, hurtful to the brand of the government and ultimately the Prime Minister, if that's where the leaks are coming from. I do believe that the Finance Minister should be supported into her own economic update next Monday. I think that's the only way to go. When you look at Bill Marneau, I just know recently he did a great job in Washington bringing together the Federal Reserve head Powell and Macklin together at the Woodrow Wilson Institute. So he's very respected internationally. He's a loss, I think, to the Canadian government. It looks like it's following the same pattern, but I just don't like. I think the Prime Minister promised to shuffle the cabinet after the St. Paul by-election. Nothing. He promised after the Montreal by-election. Nothing. And now we have this leak in a very, 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 very negative way. And I think it's really not fair to the Finance Minister to go through this leak from the Prime Minister's office. I think coming to an agreement together is one thing, but having it leaked every day is, it's a good day for the opposition, the way this is going.
Yeah, and Christy, what kind of a cloud does this cast over Monday's fall economic statement?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt. I agree with Gary. It's so hard for a minister who's been there, worked a long time, to be the subject of leaks like this and conversation like this. I think it's going to mean, a fall economic statement is a big deal for a finance minister. Hard for us to imagine, I think, but they get pretty excited about it. I don't think for Chrystia Freeland it's going to feel great when she does it. And, the finance minister does need to be there knowing that she or he has the full support of the Prime Minister. And I don't know if it won't change the contents of the report. They've been working on that for months. But I think the politics around it, as Gary Doer pointed out, will make it unnecessarily difficult for her.
Yeah, Gary Mar, on that, does it make it a bit of an awkward situation when now she has to present this on Monday and hoping that it does have the full-throated support of her Prime Minister?
Doubtless, she is in a very difficult situation. I mean, really, it's not going to be a fall economic statement. It's going to be more like, a winter deficit update. So, the budget this year was projecting that it was going to be $40 billion. That was the guardrail that was set up by the finance minister. Ultimately, the only thing that can be controlled by a finance minister is expenditures. And at best, revenues are going to be, an educated guess. Now, the parliamentary budget officer says this is going to exceed the $40 billion. I've heard estimates that it could go much higher than $40 billion. This is going to be very difficult for Chrystia Freeland to have credibility going forward. She has the controls of expenditures. Having said that, it's quite clear that there are disputes between the Prime Minister's office and Chrystia Freeland over whether certain policies are good or not. And so, in a sense, her authority as finance minister has been usurped by the Prime Minister's office, and that cannot be a very comfortable situation for her to go onto Monday's fall economic statement.
Gary Doer, I'll give you the last word on this one.
Well, Mike, when you consider that the federal government found $6 billion for this GST stocking stuffer, gift package that nobody really understands in the private sector, and we've got this huge issue of NATO funding, which we probably will talk about in the next segment, with the United States. Why aren't we? I'm glad we're investing $1 billion on the border. I think that was a good announcement, or leak, whatever it is. It's going to be in the fiscal statement on Monday.
Not quite an announcement just yet, eh?
That's right. And I think that if we've got to deal with this NATO commitment, and that's the Prime Minister's signature on that piece of paper. And your word is your bond. And right now, the word of the Prime Minister, it's not just a problem with Trump, it's a problem with the Senate, it's a problem with governors, it's a problem with the military relationship between Canada and the United States. So I would amend some of these giveaways to keep our word with our allies.